Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is time. It is tier list season. We've had some rancid tier lists. Well, a single tier list that is very rancid that came out there. I'll comment on that later. I want to preface this by saying, the spirit of competition works in a way where, a lot of things can happen. In practice, things can happen. People can innovate in the meta that makes them into an outlier, right? In terms of our predictions and the tier list that we are making today, this is going to, of course, leverage the information, the body of information that we have when it comes to, of course, the spring split. There's, of course, past implication that matters too, intangible things that are harder to measure, how T1 ramp up, of course, when it comes to tournaments, or maybe, the history of a player like Keen at the World Championship. I think I don't want to put too much weight into that. I think Chovy still had a fantastic World Championship last year. I think that he was quite poor at MSI, but I think that he does better and better. But I think it just makes it so convoluted if we're going to do like a guessing game of, how people, will leverage their intangibles here. I think to some effect, of course, T1 coming into this tournament with exactly the same roster as last year, and G2 having the exact same roster as last year, I think it becomes a little bit easier to measure. Additionally, I want to say that if teams are in the same tier, we're going from left to right in terms of the ordering. If two teams are in the same tier, let's say Team Liquid and FlyQuest are in S+, and let's say we have G2 here in S+, it means that maybe there's a 52 to 48% chance in favor of G2. The difference is rather minimal. Maybe, in 100 best of fives that they play, maybe, FlyQuest in this circumstance win 48 and G2 win 52, right? So the differences are minimal, of course. And I just wanted to highlight that and preface that. So we're all in the same loop. So for you guys that skip ahead and you just check where your favorite team is placed and ignore all of this, I curse you with stones in your shoes. All right, let's get into business. Team number one, moment of truth. For me, it is going to be, well, before I say it, I should say that I've watched all of LEC. I've watched almost all of LPL. I say almost because during winter when I was in KC, I missed some games. I only looked at the big ones. Same thing with LCK. LCS, I watched playoffs. Brazil, I watched the finals. And VCS, I missed out on. And PSG, I watched, I believe, 3 BO5s that they played. So there's that. This is the information that I'm working with. All right? First and foremost, number one, Bilibili. Why is Bilibili number one, YamatoCannon? Well, I think that in terms of their bot jungle synergy and how they dominate the early game and how that translates to dragons and early bot dives, I do think that they are the best at it when it comes to all of the teams in this tournament. I think that Elk and On have such a insane form right now that I think that they are a step above everybody else's ball lane right now. I think that Shun is a player that has not received as much attention because, Kanavi and of course, I want to call him Taylor Swift for some reason. Milky Way are two players that have been put in situations where they've had to carry for the team to progress, and they've been given opportunities to do more, and they succeeded in doing that. So they are the junglers that people talk about the most, but Shun has been phenomenal. Shun has been very, very sharp in terms of invade timings, how he plays together with On. The time that they've spent together is really shaping up to, sharpen the spear that is now Bilibili that has added Knight to the pool. I think that in terms of team fighting, this is a team that is mechanically, collectively so damn gifted that it's just a beautiful thing to watch. This is plain and simple, gold Olympic medal in in ice skating, you know, levels of beauty in terms of the space that they conquer, just watching each individual player rewinding in the fights and seeing how much they squeeze is truly a work of art. I think that sometimes, you know, in terms of how they progress the game and how they give away leads, and sometimes how they can show a little level of sloppiness when it comes to some Drake setups that put them in harder spots than necessary, could be maybe a fault that you can give in their direction. I think in terms of their solo lanes, you know, especially in the finals, you could see some flaws there, like Ben playing Rumble is not super exciting. You know, he has a lot of champions in his pool. Jax is not so strong right now. Maybe he's going to play Camille and pop off into tanks. But his Kisanda is good. Rek'Sai is kind of dead. His Atrox is good. His Rumble, his Rumble lanes well, but honestly, his ultimates are flying left and right, causing forest fires, and there is no firefighters on the Rift, you know? Honestly, you barely need them on bin ults. Knight as well, you know, he mentioned in an interview as well, like he will play the Aurelion Sol because he copied Chovy, but his Aurelion Sol is definitely a budget version of Chovy's right now. But these are things that both these players can definitely solve. But if they don't, it could easily be a knock on them, right? Definitely, it could be a knock on them. So Bilibili as a team, I think they're the most complete. And I think that regardless of which direction the meta might head in, I think that they are ready to go. You know, Elk is a player that has such a wide range of champions that he's successful on, whether it's the Kalista, the Varus, the Aphelios, the Jinx, the Lucian, even Senna that they played, of course, against Genji last year when they played that game 5. You know, they are ready for it all. And I think that this makes me believe that Bilibili is the strongest team that comes in to the tournament. So they are my favorite. The team that comes very close to them is Genji. So we talked about Chovy a little bit, right, in terms of his Aurelion Sol. Somehow Chovy has managed to outdo himself. Chovy has such a large body of work in the last years. Ever since he joined the LCK, he has such a big volume of monster performances. And he has set such a high standard for himself that it didn't seem possible for him to even break that. And somehow in this spring split, he has managed to do so. A big question was, how is Genji going to manage with the separation of Delight and Peanut that were driving forces behind Genji in the previous year? They added fantastic players, of course, in Canyon and Lehend, but it was a question mark, right? Because Canyon didn't have like the best splits ever, but Canyon is my jungle GOAT. Of course, he's going to do well. You know, Genji as a team, you know, Chovy has carried games that look uncarryable on the likes of Azir, Talia, Aurelion Sol even, due to some of the issues that they have. The issues that they have on occasion, I would say, is, you know, I think their bot lane is wildly inconsistent. I think that Pace as a player, it's sometimes you get reminded of, you know, that he's still quite early in his career. That shouldn't really matter when we evaluate players, so we're just going to call it for what it is. You know, if we just compare, for example, Pace's Lucian to Elk's Lucian, you can really see such a stark difference in terms of presence. And I think this is what, you know, Genji's bot lane is lacking. I think that Canyon is a solid player. I think that he will not be a liability against anybody. I think that when it comes to Keen, I think that he has had a fantastic split. He won his first World Championship, and I think that he comes into this tournament with a very good champion pool, right? He plays the TF, he also plays the Rumble. You know, probably has the best Rumble at this tournament, which I think is a big plus. I think the top side of Genji is very sharp. But I think that, you know, the difference in strength of Chovy against Knight, I don't think it outweighs the difference of Bilibili's bot lane against Genji's bot lane. Chovy, to me, still comes into this tournament as the best player in the world. I think that you might even be able to go so far to say that he might be the strongest player to ever have touched the game. So it's it's a very, very different conversation. The boat against the GOAT, because I still think Faker is, of course, the GOAT due to the longevity and amount of trophies that are in his cabinet. And, of course, you know, Chovy has been dominating the LCK for a very long time now. Oof, a very long time. But that conversation is for a different video. Shout out to my boy Rookie. Nevertheless, Genji, my second here. Another thing that I really like about Genji, I think that there is a lot of sequences in terms of their lane assignments, how efficient they are in terms of farm distribution on side. I think this is something that they do so wonderfully. I think that this is something that they do super, super well. And I would say that they have a slight edge against Bilibili there, because we could even see, you know, Top Esports as a team, I think their biggest strength is how they farm side and how they control river with Mako and Tian. This is something that they did super, super well. And I think that this is something that they leverage against Bilibili too. But Bilibili managed to just find their way when it comes to team fights or in early game or in terms of the traps that they set up against, of course, Top Esports. But this is something that Genji do well, and you know, we'll have to pay attention because, you know, Chovy gets his farm. But I will put them behind Bilibili this time around. Bilibili is my number one, Genji is my number two. In the S tier, we of course are going to put T1 and Top Esports. In terms of what order, I'm not so sure. I'm going to listen to my own reasoning and my own ramblings, and maybe I will make a little decision after. At T1, you know, my biggest fear for T1 is that we've seen this global phenomenon that is lane swapping. And I think that the lane swapping might just be the biggest counter to T1. Why? Lane swapping really, really removes resources from the hands of top laners and removes bot lanes from very, very volatile matchups. And when we think of T1, when is T1 at their best? T1 is at their best when Zeus can play in isolation and T1 play a heavy-handed bot lane enough that they can pressure dive, that it forces a reaction from the enemy jungle. If Zeus can play in isolation and T1's bot lane get enough pressure so they pull jungle attention, and then as they extend into mid game, they have enough pressure on mid that Zeus has enough information to push side, Zeus carries games. But if he's getting camped, if he's getting ganked, and he is not allowed to cheat waves on side, we see him dying plenty. We see him dying plenty. Zeus, of course, when he's in those positions to carry, he delivers. It's a very unique champion pool with the Vayne coming through, loves the TF. But when T1's bot lane can't achieve what they want to achieve, I think this also bleeds into Owner. I think Owner is a very mechanical player, but T1's biggest weakness, in my mind, something that we saw at the World Championship even last year when they reshaped the whole meta, is that in standard games where Rakan needs to be played, Nautilus needs to be played, and jungle and support need to control river together and then collapse on side, and the solo lane that is Zeus needs to be patient, this is where they have a harder time. And I think if T1 are playing the Rumble lanes, the Nico lanes, the Ashe lanes, the Varus lane, the Raven lanes, the Kalista lanes, I think that if they're in standard, I think this is very good for them because they can get leads through bottom side, and then this gives freedom to Owner and Zeus. Mechanically, this team is super talented. They find ways to fight super, super well. But when it comes to Bilibili and Genji, the same thing can be said for them. So this is not necessarily like an edge that they have, right? So the bottom line for me, right? When we see T1 being shoehorned in positions where they need to pick the more standard supports, I don't think Korea is necessarily better than any of the players around him, right? When he plays the more unique champs, this is where he looks fucking solid, you know? And it's not like a play like On can't drop a Nico on anyone's head, you know, because he did, right? It's more about the fact that Korea as a player, I like his Rakan less, I like his Nautilus less. Because if we look at the LCK, right, I do think that the strongest bot lane out of the LCK is Delight and Viper, and they are not at this tournament. So With that being said, I think I've highlighted how I view T1, very strong team fighters. If their bot lane can generate enough information through bot, and then as it extends into mid game around mid 2, for Zeus to farm freely, I think this is a team that can set up around objectives super well, play mechanically super beautifully. Korea is like the epitome of that, right? Mechanically super, super sharp, but on the more the standard game, think back to the World Championship. We had Korea play Alistar against Genji. They played Alistar Kaiser, a farming bot lane. A big criticism in the past was that Owner didn't connect with his bot got dove and they got slaughtered. I think some of those things are still lingering. So the main question here is, can T1 figure out a way to enforce their way of playing the same way they did at the World Championship? But also at the same time, with all of these things being said, they were competitive against Genji, but Genji in the end won out. Top Esports is a team. I think the main knock against them is, I think that Tian, there's a level of inconsistency to him. I think the same thing can be said about Owner too, but I do think that Owner ramped up a lot when it came to the playoffs. I think Owner had like a bad game against the Kazakhs that we saw, where he was face-shaking River and was doing some pathing errors in terms of the camp sequence that put him in a position to die against the Kazakhs. Tian does similar things, but I think that he's not as mechanically rewarding as the Owner. As strange as it might seem, Tian's Lee Sin has looked a little bit better than Owner's Lee Sin. Owner's Lee Sin has been not a classic Owner Lee Sin in this split, I would say. I think someone that I didn't mention for T1, which I will mention now because the comparison between Faker and Cream, I think Cream is a very talented player. I think that we saw his weakness when he was playing, for example, Talia. I think that when Ari was out of the picture, he wasn't as impactful as he was against the JDG series. I think that Cream is a fantastic player, but he's still quite early in his come up. This is a player that needs more experience. The mid lane role around him here with Faker, Knight, and Chovy being there, he is just, in my mind, at a disadvantage before he proves otherwise. Faker as a player, for what he does for T1, I think that he does so much dirty work. I think that he figures out lane states often without any help. He figures out side lane without any help. In a lot of cases, itemizes to create space for the young guns on this team. Faker does a shit ton of dirty work, and I think that genuinely his spring split was fucking solid. I think that in regards to his regular split performances, for example, in summer when he went through the injury, it was rough. Maybe the finals against, of course, Genji back in spring too, because, of course, in the regular split, this was the T1 2023 spring where he was super, super dominant, where, Korea showed every champion in the game to play bot, and Faker was playing Gragas and Kassadin, and he would like be doing inventions, I think this split was a very good split for Faker. And I think that, the intangible effect here of T1 being a team that, have proven to be more effective when it comes to the internationals, I think that, putting them above Top Esports here makes sense. And I repeat, coming into a tournament like this, things can change, and you can come back here and blame me if this turns out to be wrong. We're working with what we've seen so far. Even T1, when they played MSI last year, as you recall, they took JDG to Game 5, right? JDG won the tournament, but they took JDG to Game 5, and this is something that Genji, of course, weren't even, given a chance to, So T1 definitely ramp up as things come into the tournament, but I've talked about my concerns. So Top Esports, to continue on them, 369, I think arguably he is the best top laner coming into this tournament. Like the main thing that he's lacking, right, is of course the Rumble. I think in the finals, I think that he played better in my mind than Bin. Bin didn't need to do much to win this finals. I think the 369 has had a fantastic split. I think also Jackie Love and Mako is a very, very strong bot lane that will make it competitive against the rest of the field. I think here in the top 4, I would say that Genji's bot lane is the weakest one out of all of the ones that are here. Maybe we'll do a maybe top 15 tier list of players, maybe top 10, and then we do like a top 5 in each position, something like this. Let me know in the comments below if this sounds interesting. Holy shit, I'm doing the YouTuber thing. Click the bell, blah, 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 blah. All right, we continue. A tier. A tier, A tier, A tier. A tier is G2. A tier is G2. So let's assess G2. G2 as a team, I think that throughout winter and spring, they've shown an evolution in their macro. Their macro is better. They have 5 players that actively assess information real time. You know, basically, to describe macro in a very simple manner when it comes to the mid to late game, the sequencing where you're farming is basically a sequence of gaining information. The way you want to play the game is like a lot of teams in the LEC and LCS and lower end teams in LPL and LCK, they play for mid prio. But the extension of mid prio is that if you can push mid, you can be first everywhere else. And the idea is that you want to create a circumstance where you can push mid with as little people there as possible. And then by extension, you want to be able to push sides with as little people there as possible. If the enemy is not showing, you need to have a show of force in order to guarantee yourself the ability to push, because in case the enemy is hiding in fog, you're matching and you're fighting, right? So if you can build vision and gain information by spotting enemy jungle and support, you can read the enemy's play and you can steal sideways. When it comes to Lucian Army, this is the main thing that European teams are missing when it comes to playing Lucian Army. It's like people pick Lucian Army because other people do it, they learn how to lane with it, and they don't know how to win games. But Lucian Army is OP because they can gain vision around mid, the enemy needs to show in order to pressure Lucian Army so he can't dash, and through that, side lanes get to farm for free. And G2, to me, is the only team that is aware of this. That is not in the top 4, of course. G2 macro-wise, I think that they are on even footing with these guys. But when it comes to mechanical skill, when it comes to lane phase, I fucking worry about them. I worry about them. Because at the same time as G2 has worked on this macro ability, this macro skill, these other teams have honed it because they have a lot of resistance in this regard. I think that Caps is a fantastic player and they have the strongest roster out of all these teams below them too. There could be a world where they maybe cause some upsets against these guys in one game or maybe 2, playing some shenanigans and, you know, through maybe creative drafting, you know. Caps has it in him, you know, he plays a lot of unique champions. He had this Kled arc, Cassio arc, you know. If G2 managed to find a strategic edge, turning them into outliers, as they did at MSI with their Nautilus mid that, you know, made Faker play it too, there is maybe, you know, room for G2 to cause some upsets. But it would be just that. It would be an upset because they are heavy underdog against these teams above them. I would even go so far to even maybe make a separation here. I would make a separation here. In regards to the rest of the teams, you know, I would, you know, I think in regards to Fnatic, I think that just based off of player strength, you know, the main concern about Fnatic is that they have a very low floor, you know. Razork at his worst, Humanoid at his worst, it's not a good look. But at their best, they are far better than the players surrounding them, in my opinion. I think that, you know, Oscarinin has had a very poor year by the standard that he set for himself, in my opinion. I don't know if it's, you know, residue lingering from his injury. I don't want to speculate, you know, I don't know what's going on there, but he's definitely not been having a good time, you know. I think that there has been a lot of top laners that have performed better than Oscarinin. We continue. I think that Humanoid and Razork, they will live and die by this, but I think that, you know, with the removal of Trimby and the addition of June, I think that June is someone that is quite impressive. I think that in Spring Split, he was the best performing support in Europe. And I think that, you know, he has done a great job on this roster. I think that Noah is playing in a way that shows me that he recognizes his flaws. I think for the longest time, I felt that he was a KDA player. I think that he managed to lane well, get good CS numbers, but then in terms of how much he got out of fights, I think that it was very little. And I think at first, he was often kind of falling over himself, in fights. There was like Zeri games where he just 3 items, like, wow, the Zeri can actually carry the game, but then he just kind of misuses Flash, or there were moments where this happened with Jinx too, where he was in a position to carry, but he just really didn't deliver. But I feel as the playoffs progressed, I do think that he was playing better and better. It seemed like there was a point in time where he recognized his flaw and is actively working on it, because there were moments where he popped off. I remember when he like sidestepped Yonult on Jinx and he was like putting the damage in. He was playing with an elevated sense of risk, but with a little bit more confidence, right? It's like ADs should strive to be like Elk, Elk is really, really pushing the boundaries of what he can achieve. Sometimes goes a little bit over, but in a lot of cases, he's squeezing, and when he has items, everyone in the game feels it. You want to be the AD that when the enemy presses tab and see you get items, they get scared shitless. This should be the goal for everyone. And that's why I'm excited for a player like Kalist, because he's trying to play towards that. He's not there yet, but he's actively playing in a way that shows that he's aware of what he wants to become. And those trajectories excite me. So Noah, I think he's actively improving, not there yet, but he is moving in the right direction. So I put Fnatic here. Fnatic on a bad day though could drop here, but I will take it when that happens. Second, like this is a unique one, because I think that when it comes to Jensen inspired Bwipo, I think this is a top side that I think that can do fine, maybe internationally. But I think in regards to Team Liquid, I think that I really, really appreciate the consistency of their play. I think Team Liquid is a hallmark of a team that is coached well, led well. This is Impact and Code JJ, legendary players. They should be in the GOAT conversation for North America. Like, they've done so much for the damn region. And every team that Impact has been on did just have a fucking mountain up top. And I think that in the finals that they played against FlyQuest, there was a level of cohesiveness that was very impressive about Team Liquid. They made decisions as one. They, really, really, set up around objectives well. They collapsed on sides super, super well. Punished FlyQuest when they overreached and when they tried to squeeze. And I think the Team Liquid is just, as mentioned before, is just a hallmark of a well-coached team. They are all on the same page. I think that APA has a very good champion pool coming into this tournament, which I think is good for him, I think that I am impressed by how hard APA is like grinding the solo queue ladder. The same thing for Bwipo. I wish I would see like some of the other players grind just as hard, I think, you go to MSI, you better fucking grind your ass off, I think, this is something that all players should do, It's like, you qualify to MSI, you've qualified to another opportunity to grind even harder and elevate your gameplay, so you better fucking take it. But enough on that tangent. Team Liquid, to me, I think that if, I put Team Liquid here on third, because they are definitely the type of team to be able to punish the likes of, let's say, Fnatic on a bad day, I think that's entirely plausible. I think that FlyQuest, in the same vein as Fnatic, I think that they have players in Inspired and Bwipo that can perform at a very, very high elite level, but that also comes at the risk of, a little bit of a lower floor, And for now, I would have to put FlyQuest here, but I could see a world where FlyQuest have a higher upside than a Team Liquid. But I think that the upside of Team Liquid breaking through that at the current point in time, I think is a little bit unrealistic. But I would put Fnatic above them both. After that, You know, I think watching PSG, I wasn't too impressed. Like the PCS is quite uneventful. It is a question of leading up to Drakes and picking big team fight ultimates. I don't see like heavy contention around the big push. I think that there's a hint of outdated gameplay. I feel like in the PCS, and I think that that level of gameplay is going to be punished when it comes to the international stage. When it comes to Gum and Estro, I really don't have an opinion. I can't really place them, and I don't want to do this thing where I didn't watch them, so I'm just gonna fucking put them here. I don't want to do that thing. Great, I can't put them away. So I did it anyway. Right, nice. You know, the main thing that stood out to me about Loud is that I think that Tinones looks quite sharp. I think that you know, Robo and Croc. These are not players that excite me too much. I think that Root, I expected more from him than I watched the finals. I feel like the gameplay is like emotionally driven. Sometimes when I was watching the final, I feel like you know, they are playing to prove a point, which is interesting because it's like when both teams had Nasher, they would always be like just over posturing, over chasing. It's like they would like want to kill a guy, you know, to send a message, you know, make him bleed. Like in terms of the progression and how they finish games, it just leaves too many holes. And I think that it's like if Loud is going to beat any of the teams above them, I feel like they need to win the game like 10 times. Like if you lose a lead against the likes of T1, Top Esports, Genji, Bilibili, like they're gonna run you through the ground, right? That's like a hallmark of a great team is that you give an inch, they're gonna take an arm, and then they're gonna make a stew and feed their whole family with it, right? Cannibalism. But when it comes to the lower end teams, it's like no game state is honest. I always do this thing when I co-view or co-stream. I say, yo, I am plain and simple calling that this game is giga favored in this direction if they look to play around these timings and they play around this and they wait for this. And the higher the quality of the team, the more likely that is to happen, and the less quality of the team, you know, that a ride to the Nexus is going to be filled with bullet holes, you know? I guess that's it. I didn't want to put Estrol and Gam, but they are here now. So, fuck it. I don't know much about these guys. Okay, I'm rather happy though. I'm rather happy. I think that this is going to be a very exciting tournament. Keep in mind, guys, when it comes to the format, this is going to be, you know, we have the group. I guess I can pull up the group. We have the group of FlyQuest is with PSG and T1. So there's that, of course. Let's snap a quick picture and then put it on Imgur. And then I will put it on the Streamlabs. Just stay with me. There we go. Forgive me for the silence. I will keep talking so you know that your internet didn't die. There we go. There we go. That's the bracket. So I did these brackets. I didn't get too excited about the group draw, right? The group draw was rather uninteresting to me because I think it's pretty straightforward what's going to happen. Like in my mind, I do think that FlyQuest is better than PSG. I think that T1 is better than EST. It's just a time zone team. I do think that Top Esports is going to win against Loud, and I think Fnatic is going to win against Gum. So not too crazy there. We're going to have maybe a T1 versus FlyQuest matchup, which is super exciting. And then, of course, Top Esports versus Fnatic, which is, you know, a historic rematch with only Jakilov is the player who was a part of the last one. Was 369 in Top Esports back then? He was, right? 2020 Top Esports 369. I think he was, right? Nevertheless, I think top East was going to beat Fnatic, and then I think Fnatic is going to make it through. Of course, FlyQuest, they got a tougher draw because you lose the best of 3 and it can get iffy, right? So you cannot lose against PSG, twice. There's that. But a very important detail, always when it comes to MSI, is like teams that have won the region have figured out their recipe to winning. And in that, there's always going to be more room for a potential upset, because when it comes to a team that has won the region, like if you play against, like, let's say a 5th place LCK team, they have flaws that they didn't manage to figure out. And there is maybe more room for exploitation or for them to fall over on themselves. But if you have a team that has won a region, they're going to bring their own flair to the table. So I'm excited to watch this either way. And more news on co-streaming later down the line. You know how it is. Finally, I wanted to round off this video by just showing you guys this one. So this is the Doublelift one. This is the Doublelift one, and this is hilarious. This is hilarious because for those who don't know, not looped in, basically I watched the Doublelift video of this, and maybe giving him more attention in City, because he plain and simple admits to not have watched any LPO. And he basically just fast forwarded through highlights of the LPL finals and managed to cook up this atrocity. I think when it comes to the massive body of work that these teams needed to put in order to get to the point where they were at, I think is so much data that you need to assess to make, of course, a proper tier list. But if somehow Doublelift was right, it does make things even funnier. I do think that the interesting one, of course, is top esports. Like top esports is a fantastic team. They are really, really good. I think if we could populate this with like Hanwha Live, we could populate this with, like, let's say LNG, NIP. Like, I think that these teams would be above. I think there's like more teams in LPL and LCK that we could put into this that would be above G2 and Fnatic. So this is a bit silly to me. I think I don't know what reason Doublelift has to get himself involved, but for me, it's funny. So I thought that I would highlight it. Top esports. It would be too funny if somehow G2 upset top esports now. I would be very annoyed. Very annoyed. Nevertheless, I bring back the picture of my tier list. Let's do a player tier list further down the line. I'm cooking up the video in regards to, of course, what's it called? The player tier list. But more on that later. Thank you so much for watching. If you sneezed during this video, bless you and bless your face. I'll catch you on the other one. Peace.